We're all sick, tired, wasted. We're all sick, tired, wasted. You're not the only one. Welcome to Redacted Tonight VIP. I'm Lee Camp. On the show today, I talk with Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author who also hosts the show On Contact here on RT America. His latest book, Wages of Rebellion, explains why revolt is a moral imperative. He doesn't just write about these tough topics, he also walks the walk. He filed a lawsuit against the Obama administration in 2012 challenging the National Defense Authorization Act, which allows our government to indefinitely detain people without a trial or charges, including journalists. I talked with Chris earlier today while we did each other's nails. And in the second half of the show, I want to address the complaint that I don't criticize Donald Trump enough. It's a harsh and hurtful critique, and that's why I want to respond to it. But first, here's my talk earlier today with Chris Hedges. Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining me.
Sure.
I have a lot of questions, but most of them revolve around Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's divorce. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, that's the primary focus of my work.
Yeah, I know that. No, actually, first I'd like to ask you, you've talked before about Sheldon Wollin's idea that we live in corporate totalitarianism ruled by the anonymous corporate state. With the case of the recent Dakota Access pipeline protest, you know, there was the private security firm alongside the militarized police using dogs and pepper spray to protect basically the investment of the big banks. The big banks are funding the pipeline. Is it fair to view those dogs as kind of the teeth of the corporate state while the actual rulers, the decision makers, the ones calling those shots, they're nowhere to be seen. They're probably not even in the Dakotas.
Yeah, that's very much, I think, what Wollin elucidates in his last book, Democracy Incorporated. And he argues that we live in, he calls it inverted totalitarianism. And by that, he means it's not classical totalitarianism. It doesn't find its expression through a demagogue or a charismatic leader, but through the anonymity of the corporate state. So you're right. It's a faceless kind of entity. And so you have a corporate system that purports to pay fealty to electoral politics, the Constitution, the iconography and language of American patriotism, and yet internally has seized all of the levers of power to render the citizen impotent. And you're exactly right. So the actual figures or entities that are pulling the strings are nowhere near North Dakota.
Right, and what do you make of Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Being charged with trespassing for simply reporting on it?
Well, they've been doing that to up and down pipelines. They were doing that when they were building the southern leg of the XL. People would actually be invited onto private land. And this, I think one of the things that's most frightening, and we saw this with North Dakota, this fusion of state security with these amorphous private mercenaries or security outfits. I was arrested during the Occupy movement with several activists in front of Goldman Sachs, but the people who actually came out and were involved in our removal from the weren't NYPD. They may have used former NYPD or FBI, but they were all the internal security of Goldman Sachs itself. We know that corporations have privatized the gathering of intelligence, that there is a fusion in down near Wall Street of these corporate and public policing entities. 70% of U.S. intelligence, of our 16 intelligence agencies, is actually carried out by companies like Bose Allen Hamilton, where Snowden worked, 99% of it. So that's very frightening when you essentially, and there's no discussion of this among the public, you are empowering these subterranean, unseen, private security entities and giving them, in essence, police power, and yet they're never identified. People don't know. We saw it with Katrina, with then Blackwater appearing on the streets of New Orleans.
Right, and in fact, the police around the pipeline mysteriously disappeared when the dogs came out, because I take it cops are not allowed to release dogs on protesters, but private security, it's a different scenario.
Right.
You mentioned how the corporate state kind of pretends to obey electoral politics, but it seems to largely be a distraction. And it seems like maybe it's always been rigged, but it seems like we're seeing an increasing level of rigging of these elections. We saw in the primaries how Bernie Sanders' campaign was undermined at every step. We've seen the reality of the rigging through the leaked DNC emails and the 100,000 voters knocked off the rolls in Brooklyn. That was just Brooklyn, New York alone. And when that was happening, we were told by our mainstream media that our election system is completely just, it's right, it can never be manipulated. Anyone saying otherwise is a conspiracy theorist. Yet all of a sudden, this weird thing has happened after the primaries, where the corporate media seems to have suddenly had a change of heart. They report regularly on how the elections could be hacked, they could be rigged. CBS News did a report recently on how someone could hack an electronic voting machine with a $15 device that sold online. What do you make of the sudden change in the media?
Well, there were many obstacles that were placed by the Democratic National Committee against the Sanders campaign. One of the biggest was that in many states they banned independents from voting in the Democratic primaries, which of course constituted most of Bernie Sanders' base. Now, the taxpayers pay for the primaries, and yet it is the party that sets the rules and games the system with superdelegates. They stole Nevada. Well, I think that at the moment, people, or let's say the power elites, have to create a level of trust and confidence in the system, even though they may know it's rigged. And so after the fact, after it's too late, one can go back and do a post-mortem when it can't affect anything. But during the process itself, you're right, that anybody who questioned the legitimacy of the system, let's call it over the corporate airwaves, was kind of dismissed as a wacko.
Yeah, and I want to ask one more question about the election before I move on to something else. I saw some of my cousins this weekend, and they want, I think, a lot of the same things that you or I want. They want more equality in our country. They want less racism. They want more privacy and less war. And they, like many Americans, say if you want those things, you have no choice but to hold your nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. What's wrong with that logic?
Well, because it's neoliberal policies, globalization, which has created the phenomena of Trump and enraged, disenfranchised supporters, primarily white. And if Clinton wins the election and continues these policies, we are going to get somebody worse than Trump. Trump as a figure may disappear from the political landscape. But until we halt the assault of neoliberalism, the programs of austerity, the corporate assault. I mean, you go to cities like Scranton, Pennsylvania, everything, they just sold their sewer system. Everything is privatized. They sold their parking authority. They've already sold their water system. Rates are going through the roof. This kind of constant, gradual gouging of the underclass, and half of the country lives in poverty or relative poverty, will create a backlash. Trump is not the phenomena. He's responding to the phenomena. And unless we break that phenomena, then we are headed the way all societies that essentially seize up and refuse to respond to the legitimate grievances of citizens are headed towards, whether that's Weimar Germany, which ended in the Nazis, or Yugoslavia, which I covered, which ended with the rise of ethnic, religious nationalists like Slobodan Milosevic and Radovan Karadzic and Franjo Tuđman and others. And that's we have to stop looking beyond this election cycle and see that this corporate-driven ideology, this commodification of the culture, this constant extracting of blood from us as citizens to pay what, in essence, were private debts of the banks, which engage in their casino capitalism, has political consequences. History has taught us that. and Hillary Clinton is only going to further that process.
Yeah, absolutely. You started to jump ahead to my next question. You touched on it. You were a war correspondent in many countries. You saw the devastation and the chaos, and you saw what led up to it. And in your book, Wages of Rebellion, Revolt, you say you see the same things in America now. Can you speak to what it is you saw that mirrors other countries? What it is you see now that mirrors other countries?
Yeah, well, what mirrors is that there is, in this case, a corporate cabal, a tiny group of the power elite that has seized the machinery of government to serve their own interests at the expense of the vast majority. So this creates what I would call political paralysis, because the normal functions of the state, the common good, we're seeing it with the hedge funds taking over school systems through charter schools, which is because they want the $600-some billion they spend. It's not about teaching disadvantaged children to read or write. There's a cannibalization. Actually, Karl Marx wrote about this as the final stage of capitalism. And I have watched countries that have, whether it's a kind of proto-fascist or an ethnic nationalist cabal seize power to serve their own interest. I've watched the explosion that takes place, and we are no different from them. We're really playing now with potentially deep unrest, especially with the proliferation of weapons in this country, and political breakdown. That's the game we're playing, and I think history has amply illustrated that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of inevitable when you have a corporate state that will just exploit everything, exploit the resources and the people to the breaking point, that eventually there will be a response. Many believe that in a capitalist society, the corporate entities will always ultimately take over the levers of the state, and they will use the state to further their ends. We talked some about that earlier with the Dakota pipeline and really with bailing out the banks in 2008. So does that mean capitalism is fatally flawed? And if so, what type of system do you think people should be pushing for?
I lost you the last part. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, is capitalism fatally flawed in that way? And if so, what type of system should people be pushing for?
Right. Well, I think we have to differentiate between different types of capitalism. There's the penny capitalism that took place in the farm community where I grew up, where farmers came in and sold their produce. There's regional capitalism. That is, a business owner owns a small factory and sits on the school board, invests in the community. And then there's something else, which is global corporate capitalism, which essentially eviscerates national borders, pushing through trade agreements like NAFTA and the TPP, driving down, doing what capitalism always does, which is maximize profit and drive down labor costs, so that the protections that workers had garnered in the industrialized world, now only about 6% of the public sector private sector is unionized, is destroyed because we can use sweatshop workers in Bangladesh who make 22 cents an hour. So I'm not actually anti-capitalist, but capitalism, and again, this is something Marx understood, has to be heavily controlled. And to break up monopolies, to break up, as we see with the banks, these institutions that are quote unquote too big to fail and that are global, that have no loyalty to the national state. And unfortunately, these corporate capitalists have taken over the system so that government now accelerates this assault, as you correctly pointed out, not only on working men and women, the poor, and now the middle class, but of course we can't forget the ecosystem itself.
Right. I think part of that heavy regulation needs to be to make sure that capitalism doesn't put a price on everything, such as air and water.
Well, that's what it's done.
Yeah.
Right, that's what it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the commodification of everything, and they will do what they do, which is that they will exploit, whether it's the natural world or whether it's human capital, until exhaustion or collapse. And now there are no impediments left.
Chris, I can't thank you enough. I hope you'll come back sometime and keep fighting.
Thanks, Lee.
We have to go to a quick break, but if you're near Denver, Colorado, or Washington, D.C., we have live stand-up comedy shows coming up in your city. Email redactedtonight@rtamerica.tv for tickets. Don't go away. Welcome back to Redacted Tonight VIP. As you may know, I host two shows here. This one, VIP, which has interviews and no studio audience. And then the other, Redacted Tonight, which does have an audience. I have spent a fair amount of time on the main Redacted, the other Redacted Tonight, talking about the DNC leaks and the corruption of Hillary Clinton. And some people say, clearly, you want Trump to win. You only go after Hillary Clinton. Well, let's see if that's true. All right, I'm going to go through it. Let's see if that's true. So first, let's set a baseline. Let's set up what I guess people want me to be doing in terms of presidential coverage. This clip is from CNN. It's apparently what counts as good anti-Trump coverage, right? It's CNN, most respected name in news. So this is CNN, the network known for holding Trump accountable. This is from like a week ago or so.
So that's right, but he's making statements now about the doctor's ability.
What's your point?
Because what you're saying is this doctor isn't qualified to make an assessment on Donald Trump. You spent time with him.
Let's say he is
qualified. You have spent time with him.
30 years ago.
Oh, so you're still talking about it.
He was 38 years old.
I spent time with him this year.
He was very healthy in his 30s.
Well, I spent time with him right now.
Okay, so that really helps viewers analyze Donald Trump. They really leave with a good, solid analysis. And by the way, one of those guys speaking in that panel is Trump's former campaign manager, who is still to this day getting paid by Donald Trump. So you have a panel of people yelling at each other, over top of each other, with some of them being paid shills for Donald Trump. That's what we're told is good coverage. And now I would like to show you the Redacted Tonight coverage of Donald Trump. But I don't have any. I'm sorry. I just never criticized Donald Trump. I don't know what to say. You have me nailed. I don't know what's wrong with me. I guess deep down in some dark place in my soul, I just really want Donald Trump to win. And that's why I never go after him. I never criticize him. I think he's just an upstanding, really smart, bold, and progressive go-getter. God, I wish someone had told me this sooner, that I'm a Trump fan. I can't believe I have no footage of me attacking him. Oh, wait, I found some. How do I say this nicely? I have never seen such a lizard brain, lizard skin, beady-eyed half-wit. A racist birther frothing at the mouth. The first fully realized Madame Tussauds wax candidate. Except they ran out of the lifelike hair and had to replace it with copper wiring torn out of Trump's own bankrupt casinos, which he sued to get his name taken off of because he said the casinos he created were so beyond shitty, they were tarnishing his brand. Oh, tarnishing your brand? Someone could wipe their dog's butt with your brand and the dog would end up dirtier, okay? Donald Trump has been accused of raping a 13-year-old girl in federal court in New York. And I think this is shocking because until now, we all thought Trump was such a good guy. This is going to ruin his Bob Rossian image as being a kind and gentle soul. Donald Trump, you spit the worst brand of simplistic, infantile, animalistic, two-faced idiocy on a daily basis, and then the next week you try and Trump yourself. You've got a soul that resembles Danny DeVito, okay? You've got a personality styled after Pol Pot. You're not a serious candidate for the presidency. You're a Far Side cartoon with face burn. Not to mention, your routine is getting old. Sure, back in the 90s, we were all down for a little xenophobic, homophobic, elitist romp through megalomaniacal lunacy. It was a crazy decade. But now, even your hate speech is on the brown side of ripe. You know that smell? You know that smell that follows you around, Donald? That's because your faux aristocratic holier than thou word salad is past its expiration date. It's rotten. I would say we should compost it, but I imagine the other manure would reject it like a bad heart transplant. So that's why I'm starting a Kickstarter right now to hire someone to follow Donald Trump around 24/7 and every 30 seconds go, "Shut up, shut up, shut up! God help me if you don't shut up!" As the Lord is my witness, I have murdered men twice your size for saying things half as dumb. I noticed in that roast of Donald Trump, you called him a good friend. Do you ever just call him up and say, "Hey, Donald, ease up on the racism"? And that is all. That is all the times I've criticized Trump. Oh, wait, I found more. Trump, how do I say this nicely? You somehow achieved the impossible. I will grant you that. You managed to make Sarah Palin seem accomplished. You've made Chris Christie seem humble, and Mike Huckabee seem rational. You've made Jeb Bush look like the lesser evil. Hillary Clinton seem down to earth. You know, Mitt Romney look like a man of the people. And you made the guy from Ancient Aliens look like he has good hair. Donald Trump, you are everything that is wrong with the U.S. political system and nothing that is right. The only reason you're running #1 in the polls of the Republican voters is because herpes wasn't on the list. According to the nonpartisan organization PolitiFact, a whopping 76% of the statements by Trump were judged to be mostly false, or pants on fire. That's a real category for them. So Trump is no average fourth grader. He's a dumb, lying fourth grader. To give you a little perspective, Bernie Sanders speaks to voters at a 10th grade level, and George Washington's farewell speech was written at a graduate level. However, when spoken through his hippo bone teeth, it sounded like this. Wah, 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 wah. Long story short, Donald Trump is no George Washington. He's closer to George the Animal Steel, a professional wrestler who ate the turnbuckles. Trump is doing the presidential candidate equivalent of eating the fucking turnbuckles. And this is significant because it represents the continued dumbing down of America. Much like the award-winning porn Butts of Thunder, we're involved in an extreme race to the bottom. So think about this all together. Over here is the most important thing going on in the world in eons. The fact that we are setting our planet on fire. And over here is all the media will talk about. An egomaniacal grand wizard who, let's be honest, isn't even that grand. I mean, he's more like a mediocre wizard. A mediocre wizard who can magically turn unemployment into racism. Ta-da! So this is an exciting time to be alive. Maybe we are on the brink of the greatest leap in human evolution in centuries, in which we completely change our life, the way we live our life to exist in accordance with the environment and our fellow humans. Or maybe we fall into a pit of vapid idiocy, arguing over building walls to stop other humans from getting near us while the world boils. You know, because there's nothing worse than boiling alongside a Mexican. Ugh. I want to boil with my own kind. You're a disease. You're an illness. You're the carcinogizer bunny, powered by hypocrisy.
I do energize. I think you say that. I do energize.
No, that's the copper wiring on your head, okay? And getting people to yell, "You're the worst," does not count as energizing. 2 weeks from now, very tired Donald Trump seen quietly reminding self white supremacy is a marathon, not a sprint. So, yeah, you really got me. I I never go after Trump. Or maybe giving Trump billions of dollars of free airtime, as CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, ABC, CBS have all done, literally billions of dollars, showing his speeches and his interviews, and then having meaningless yelling matches afterwards, is exactly what has created Trump. Maybe if these corporate networks didn't want Trump to be doing so well, they would stop covering him in a feckless, empty, vapid way and instead call him the fascist maniac he is and then move on to important news. Anyway, that's our show. But don't forget, we have 2 episodes of Redacted Tonight every week. You can get them all at youtube.com/Redacted Tonight. And we have a podcast called Moment of Clarity. That's free on iTunes and Stitcher. Good night, and keep fighting.